And today's episode of Follow Me, we're going into the Northern Kentucky woods. And we're going to be using some of my colleagues as guest subjects to investigate using systems thinking and universal design learning as part of an environmental education mini activity. So join me as we investigate new ways of teaching and also the NKU woods. So my goals for today's trip into the NKU woods are several. One, I want to get some practice just kind of playing around with ideas of universal design learning. And since I do a lot of field trip education myself, I want to see how offering different ways of learning the material from field trips could be implemented into one of my classes. Now, I've I've had a whole fall break field trip devoted to showcasing the ADA compliant accessible hiking and caving trails at Mammoth Cave. I've done an entire weekend long field trip remotely for a fully online class. I've played around with these ideas before, but I've never tried to offer different methods of presenting similar information to get similar student outcomes and have a similar discussion. So I want to play around with that a little bit. I'm going to try, this is a reach, but part of my lesson behind the lesson is to think about systems, systems in nature, systems of the university, things of that nature, to see if I can get that point across with the materials that I've developed for today. So I'm trying to blend those two ideas, and thinking about UDL and how it relates to systems thinking is, thinking about what kind of classroom activities I want to use, thinking about what kind of experience I want my students to have, thinking about what kind of outcomes, what kind of abilities, what kind of outcomes are possible using a variety of different teaching methods and letting students choose what works best for them. So trying to create the possibility of designing different types of field trips for people who want to interact with material in different ways. That's kind of my goal. We'll see how it goes today, but we'll get back to the regular programming. Okay, I know on Follow Me I've taken viewers into a lot of scary places, but there's no place scarier than where I'm about to go. A conference room. What we're going to do today is we're going to practice thinking about nature and thinking about woods and forests and things like that. And we have Jen tuning in by Zoom, which is great because we've decided to offer not just one but several ways of interacting with this topic. So obviously she might choose different ways because she's on Zoom, but we all have choices here. So just really quickly, I'm going to give you a couple prompts, and I've gotten together a bunch of like clip art images that you can use for inspiration, or maybe to spread out on the table and make a collage. You could draw your own picture based on our prompts, or if you want to do like a brief few sentences of writing, that would work as well. So whichever one you choose would be fine. And we'll get started here in a second. And so our first prompt is going to be create the woods that you would like to visit. And you can do that by drawing, by writing, or by using these clip arts to make some sort of collage, or just for inspiration. Bottles scattered.
Oh, yeah.
So Michelle is going to draw her woods. And Casey's using the clip arts think he's going to make a collage of the woods he wants to be in. And from her remote location, Jen is doing responding to this prompt in writing. We'll start with Casey. Casey worked on a kind of a collage. So Casey, tell us about your woods.
So I included basically I took the human out. And so anything like the road and parking lot runoff, the trash, the fence, the walking humans, took all of that out. Also did not initially want to include the invasive species, but I don't know, I just sort of like honeysuckle. Okay. And so that was sort of the dividing line that I chose. And I tried to include all of the sort of like natural woods, clip arts, whatever that may be.
Okay, great. And Jen, what did you write?
I thought about a specific woods that I had been in when I was younger, and I just described it. How much of that description do you want?
Give us a flavor.
It was a pine grove that you reached walking through a different kind of like deciduous trees and everything else, and then it was this big pine grove, and it was really quiet because of the needles on the ground, so it was really quiet. There were a lot of chickadees, I remember, and it was really soft to sit down because of the needles, and it smelled really good. And because the branches, pine trees have the branches like at all the levels, so you had this really like nice closed-in feeling once you got into that space. So it was just really peaceful. So I wrote about that.
Great. And Michelle did a drawing, so.
I do. So in my drawing, I have a lot of wildlife. And so I tried to draw different like birds, the sun setting, bunnies, a stray cat, a squirrel in the tree, berries for that wildlife to eat. And then this is just kind of like a little path that leads like down, so you can see that you can walk easily through the woods. If I were better at drawing, there would be more animals, but this is what you get.
So the next phase of this is we're going to investigate the woods here at NKU's campus for a little while. And you have 3 choices on how to investigate that. I have a photo slideshow that I can either show you or send to you. I have a written description, or we can go on a quick field trip and investigate the woods together. So, Michelle, how would you like to investigate the woods?
I want to do the field trip.
Okay. Casey?
I'll do the slideshow.
Okay. So, Jen, I will send you the written description of the woods, and we'll each go our separate ways and convene back here in a few minutes. So as Casey is looking over the photo slideshow, and Jen is reading the text I sent to her, Michelle and I will take off on our field trip. So we're going down this main intro path to the NKU woods. And at one point, this was actually an old farm road, the very end of an old farm road. And Michelle, if you stop here, you'll notice that there's a heck of a lot of bush honeysuckle here. Bush honeysuckle is an invasive plant that was brought in from Japan, I believe, as a way to end soil erosion at road construction sites. And just over the hill here is actually 3 Mile Road, which was a road built in the 1980s. And so this honeysuckle is left over from when they built the 3 Mile Road, and they planted the honeysuckle so the new road cut wouldn't erode away. But of course the honeysuckle has taken over pretty much all the underbrush of this part of the woods here. Now, as we look around this area, you notice we're actually walking in a dry creek now, and that will be kind of important. This woods has been used for environmental art class, and this little structure here was installed just last May 2004. And you can see part of environmental art is it gets reclaimed by nature eventually. So it's already starting to fall in a little bit, but it's still in pretty good shape. This is a right-of-way marker for the road that's just down the hill here, that they put in the 1980s. So basically, I guess even though the state doesn't own, the state has access to all the land from that marker over to the road. And again, we just see tons of bush honeysuckle around here from what they planted for during that road construction. Well, here we're looking at, we're looking at a whole bunch of bush honeysuckle trying to tackle me, but we have a tree that has fallen down, and we see different species of fungus, but some more of that shelf fungus breaking down the tree into nutrients for the rest of the critters and plants. So
what makes this shelf fungus different than the other one?
That you would have to ask a fungologist about that. I'm a fungi, but I'm not a fungologist.
Oh God.
Inspiration. We're not going to go down this path, but you know, that's a path that was completely put in by students who had been part of the environmental art class, and they just wanted to do more on their own. So it's probably not going to show up too well in this video, but we found a little bit of deer tracks here. So you can see one pretty clear footprint here, and then like a slide. And it's not uncommon to see deer here. I've seen some snakes here. Students have reported seeing a fox here. Before the arena was built across the street, there were a family of deer that had this whole range north and south of campus. In fact, I just heard something that might have been a deer.
Yeah, it sounded like a deer.
I often hear deer in here, but don't see them, which is not unusual. When the Bank, it was the Bank of Kentucky Center originally was built, the deer population shrank in this area, but there's still a healthy population here, and I often see footprints or hear them run away from me in the distance. So. Watch your step. These rocks are loose, but it is a stone bridge put in by Nick Bonner's environmental art class back in May of 2005. So this is a 20-year-old stone bridge.
Wow.
Yep. If you turn around and look this way towards the sun,
Oh, okay. Wow.
on a good, nice blue sky day, this is probably the most beautiful scenery on NKU's campus, and I really love coming here. Especially in the fall, the sunlight seems at just the right angle. So here we are at this pool, which was installed by the May 2005 environmental art class, and there's some interesting things to see here. First, I like to point out this dry creek. All those other dry creeks we've walked over and talked about combine into this one larger creek, and if you look over here, all these stones, even stones like this big, have been moved down. Whoops, there's a cool bug. Even stones this big have been moved down the river, this dry creek, by flash floods when it rains really heavily. So imagine the force of water that can move a stone like that. But then you also have litter, and right now it's looking pretty clean here. Sometimes some beer bottles wash down through the creek. Sometimes people leave stuff from eating lunches down here, or a cigarette butt that we can see here. But the big feature here is this pipe. Michelle, any thoughts on that pipe?
I would guess that's water runoff, maybe from the road.
Yes, so right over this hill is Kenton Drive. That is the north side bound of this woods, so it could be runoff from the road. I think it also collects runoff from a student parking lot. So anything that is dripping out, or coffees that are dumped out of student cars, eventually finds its way to this pool, eventually flows downstream to 3 Mile Creek, which then joins the Licking River and eventually the Ohio River. So this is the headwaters down here of 3 Mile Creek, and any pollution that's coming off of the roads and the parking lots here are eventually making it down to the Ohio River. All right, so Michelle, tell us about your experience with the field trip into the NKU woods.
Oh, yeah. It was definitely cool. I didn't realize how connected this is to the main roads of 27, Kenton Drive, whatever. But with that, you know, there's a lot to be appreciated, I think, whether it's the fungi or different art projects. It's pretty cool.
All right. Well, thanks for coming along today.
Yeah, thank you.
And now we'll come back and finish up our activity back in the office.
Okay.
Okay, so now I've asked the group, now that we've investigated the NKU Woods through word, photo, and field trip, to kind of describe what the NKU Woods is. But how I'd like you to present your versions of the NKU Woods is, how does it differ from the woods you described earlier? So we'll start with Michelle. She did collaging of the NKU Woods, but how is this different from your the woods that you wanted to visit?
Yeah, so this really differs from the woods that I wanted to visit from the wildlife. I guess in my mind I drew it where there were, various different woodland creatures around, out and about. But then when we actually went on the hike, we saw deer footprints, but I guess I didn't take into account how being loud and walking around in the woods might scare away wildlife. There were more fungi. I didn't draw any mushrooms, but there were the shelf fungus and then the just regular damp dirt, mushrooms, whatnot.
Right.
That were there. And then there were also these two invasive species, which in my drawing I only drew trees, bushes. I didn't really consider there being invasive honeysuckle and garlic mustard.
Jen, how does the NKU Woods differ from your woods?
So when I started thinking about when I read your description of the NKU Woods, I was thinking about my own trips to the NKU Woods, and I was thinking about the fact that I have sort of two versions of those woods. One is the winter version, for lack of a better, label, that is the trees don't have leaves. You can see the buildings, you can see the cars, you can hear the highway. And then the summer version, which is quiet because you can't see anything and it actually feels much more woodsy. And so when I thought about my own description of a woods, it was very quiet, and there were no humans at all. So it was just about the this has a point, I promise. It was about the smells and the sounds and the feel and everything that was, what I could see, but nothing about who was, the evidence of humans, right? And then when I read your description, I was thinking about how you didn't take a black or white, like a binary position of human or no human interaction. You sort of demonstrated the ways that humans interacted with the woods over time, and it just made me think about how I sort of had an all or nothing approach in my perspective, even of that woods. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's it.
Okay. And Casey?
That is interesting because mine sort of is similar to Jen's. So I'm just going to read what I wrote. So I said, the NKU Woods slideshow shows the reality of natural spaces in our human-centered built environment. Because when I assembled my ideal woods in a collage, I tried to take out elements of the human, whether that's trash, infrastructure, invasive species, anything like that. But the slideshow reinforced to me that it's impossible to have a truly natural space untouched by humans, like trash, drainage pipes, other railroad infrastructure shapes the reality of the NKU Woods. In the Anthropocene, there's nowhere untouched by humans. I had to get that word in there, especially in an urban, suburban environment. So my last line was, our ideal wood should be about humans living in harmony with the natural environment instead of doing the impossible, taking out the human.
Right.
So,
how does the woods function as nature or natural?
I think it's interesting all of the different pathways that are in there where you can really see, I guess, nature and it being natural when it does become overgrown. And so when we were walking in just through the walkway, there were some paths that I guess they do get walked fairly often, or it wasn't as overgrown as there were some other parts. And so I guess that would be
my best example.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the woods' function as nature?
Yeah, I mean, nature is what humans allow it to be now.
Okay.
And so I think, yeah, as Jen said, she used the word binary,
Right.
but sort of deconstructing that idea of nature versus the human.
Okay.
Because humans are nature. Nature is shaped by humans. What we think of as nature, and so.
And I swear I haven't set up these responses beforehand, but that leads well into my next question. Describe how the NKU Woods functions as a part of NKU.
I have trouble thinking of woods as not where humans don't belong. Because obviously everything is mediated, right? But when I go to the woods, I'm always seeking a break from the things that are in my life every day. So it's hard for me to separate out the NKU woods from NKU, because even when I'm in there, I'm still aware of the fact that I'm part of the campus and part of my workspace, if that makes sense. So I can't separate them out in a way that I can when I go, say, to the Cincinnati Nature
Right.
Center, and I'm like just there, I'm just there with other people who are just there for that reason mostly. I mean, I don't know.
So,
I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah, but maybe to rephrase, what part does the woods play in NKU in general or overall?
I don't know that many people know about the woods at
Right.
NKU. So I think, like, if you asked anyone in the administration if they know about NKU Woods and what part it plays, the answer would be, what are you talking about?
Right.
But I think for some people who know about it, it plays a significant role because it's a space that the students in the art classes can go, and it's a great place to look at the way that humans interact with that woods. But that's a tough question too. I mean, I'm just trying to like explore why that's difficult, but I think it's that I wouldn't have known it was there, David, except for the fact that you told me about it.
Yeah, and it's
I
also,
think most people on campus don't know that it exists.
yeah, and it's also, I mean, how we think about where NKU is located, right? It's suburban, but it's on the edge of the city, right? It's by a major highway. And so you come here and step foot on campus for the first time, and woods is not the first thing you think. And so I agree, I would not have known about the NKU woods if not for you.
So, what decisions or indecisions or actions or inactions has NKU taken to create or to maintain having the woods as a hidden part of NKU?
I think that does just depend on who the person is. So if it is like students that live in the dorms that want to walk through the woods and maybe take a break from class, then that's one facet. But then there is another like actual part where, you know, different administrators or faculty members can make the active choice to preserve the woods and take like students to their class through the woods, or make those conscious decisions to do that.
Well, and I was also interested in the slideshow. It mentioned there were trails or installations that were part of a class 20 years ago. So it would be interesting to hear more about that class and like hear more about the outdoor education tradition at NKU.
Any final thoughts on how NKU has treated the woods or takes action about the woods?
I think I would just add a plus to what Casey said about making the interactions between the university and the woods in terms of the art space more visible. But there's part of me that doesn't want the university to get really involved in the woods.
Right.
Because it sometimes seems to me that when the university gets involved with things, those things get ruined.
So maybe it's part of a system that's better when it's forgotten by the system.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, your prompt for your critical reflection that you'll submit by Sunday at 11:59 on Canvas is the NK Woods natural? Take a position and defend it. And I'll see you all next week. Thank you very much. So, thinking about some of the results of our activities today, I think it went pretty well. I think all three of my students met the learning outcomes that I wanted them to have. Had a good discussion about the material afterwards. Of course, I had a select crew of three of the most intelligent people I know, but I think it went very well. I didn't quite get them to that thinking about the university, thinking about nature or the woods at NKU in kind of a systems design thinking, like is NKU making decisions that design how healthy the woods is, was one of my goals, but didn't quite get there. But I think for the quickness of this lesson, the quickness of the discussions, and I was really trying not to prompt them that way as best as possible. So we got close to that, and I was pretty happy with that. In terms of answering my questions about designing my own classes, designing my own field trip experiences with a buffet style of activities, I think I have proved to myself that you can get those discussions, get those content learning outcomes through a variety of means. It doesn't have to be actually going and physically seeing it. Referring to my problem of practice, some of the things that I'm talking about there, I still think some of those affective goals, the self-confidence, the actually doing it and seeing it and being part of a community that goes and has this experience. I'm not sure how I struggle with how do you replace that with alternative methods for doing a field trip. But in terms of the content goals, in terms of the student learning goals, the ability to participate in the academic discussion that I wanted them to have, I thought that was very successful. And so, so overall, I think it went well. Still have some questions about how it would interact with some of my field-based teaching that I think is an important opportunity for students, and how I might implement UDL to make my classes more inclusive in that way. All right. Well, the rain brings an end to this thrilling adventure on Follow Me. Thanks for joining us, and please tune in next week. We'll be taking an adventure down the Green River by kayak and canoe. See you later on Follow Me.